All right.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of East Coast Rams podcast. I am your co-host Ashton here with my awesome co-host Zac. Happy summer, everyone. We are going over Minicamp. We are talking about OTAs, talking about a lot of different fun stuff. Zac, is it finally good weather in Indiana? How's everything going over there? It was a little warm today here in Virginia.
Yeah, no, it's been beautiful weather. Can't complain at all. We've been travel softball season is upon us, so we are traveling all over Indiana trying to watch our kids play some softball.
Yeah, I played some soccer today, adults league, and that was a lot of fun. So, yeah, didn't do too bad. Started off a little rough, but we pulled the Rams. Not a great first quarter, went down 0-3, but we came back to win it 9-5. So proud of the boy there.
Nice.
Yeah, I do feel old though, so don't worry about that.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. Indiana Pacers made it to the finals. So,
Yeah.
I know everyone about Halliburton and wearing that Purdy jersey. They went to school together. Give him a break a little bit. I don't like that he's repping the 49ers, but Purdy and him are buddies. So, leave it at that. Stanley Cup's also going on right now. So there's a lot of action
A lot
happening.
of sports.
So.
Hockey, the hockey finals is starting up here soon too.
That's why, the Stanley Cup.
Oh yeah, Stanley Cup. Sorry.
Yeah, that's happening. The first game's tonight. So Stanley Cup first is tonight. Tomorrow night is the first of the finals, and we're here to talk about all things LA Rams.
Yeah, and if you guys don't mind, please like and subscribe. And if you're watching us live at any time, feel free to come in and shoot us questions on chat or give us your thoughts. And please tell us what is kind of the exciting storyline of this offseason that you're kind of paying attention to. Is it Jordan Whittington kind of raising the bar at OTAs with Puka out? Or is it AD and Verse having little hijinks, little challenge back and forth, which I'm just going to be honest, and we can start with this, Zac. I love Verse. I think Verse is fantastic. He looks like a beast of a man. AD is different, though. He's a different monster. Even at his age, I think he's going to cook Verse. I'm going to be honest.
Oh, there's no doubt that I think that Verse is underestimating what Aaron Donald can do. But this is exactly Verse's. This is who he is. He's this guy who has so much energy around him. He could take on. He thinks he could take on whoever. And I think this would be a fun challenge, and I can't wait to see the videos that come out when them going toe to toe in the weight room, because I think that it's just fun to watch, and it's fun watching these Rams legends. Aaron Donald currently, but even you're watching all these guys come back into play with this young Rams team, and really guiding them throughout this. Whitworth has been at OTAs as well, helping out and kind of, talking with the O-line and the other offensive players. And it's just fun to watch these players who went recently to win a Super Bowl with the Rams coming in and working with the younger players. So I'm all for it. I'm all for the fun.
So quick question, and we need to make this a poll on our Twitter account because people love our polls. Let me ask, biggest trash talker in Rams history, would it be Verse? Would you say Marcus Peters, or would you do Ramsey?
I would probably go more Ramsey. Jared Verse is still, he's still young.
He's yappy. He's yappy.
He is yappy. And I think we're seeing that more within the last kind of 3 weeks when he's kind of been on this little media tour that he's been on. But I think right now I'm going to give it to Ramsey. Let's see how this year goes, because I think the yappiness from Verse can really skyrocket this season.
Yeah, him mic'd up is a gem. I can't wait for next. I think they got him only once last season, so hopefully we'll get 2 more mic'd ups. But verse, uh, yeah. So do you want to go over Jordan Whittington or Stenson? Mhm.
Go ahead and start with Jordan Whittington.
Yeah, so Jordan Whittington, I think Puka was out the first 2 days of OTAs, but day or two, and you know who was taking the primary snaps at his position and still impressing? It wasn't Tutu, it wasn't Adams filling in directly. They had Jordan Whittington, and I think for anyone, especially if you have Puka on fantasy, I'll just say, I think Jordan Winton is a perfect stash and handcuff and worth of like holding on a bench, even if it's a smaller bench like 6 or 7. I really do think because he produced in the limited reps he had last year, and I think he could easily fill in Zach for the next time if Puka ever misses time.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. If you're struggling to find someone the later rounds of the draft, I do think Whittington would probably be a good pickup to have as a depth piece, an insurance package. I usually always keep one Rams receiver as an insurance package just in case that happens.
hmm
It's always seems to be a very good go-to.
Yeah, no, Whittington helped me win a few games last year because he did perform it. I think week 4 and 5,
I mean,
whenever Puka.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have to use it last year, but that was the reason why I had Kyron Williams and Blake Corum on my team.
hmm
It was always that insurance factor that if something did unfortunately happen to Kyron Williams, I did believe that Blake Corum was going to be that fill-in spot and take those reps. So
Steve, I get your point here. I'll just reply. He directly goes to linemen and tells them they're getting cooked, like consistently, especially if he feels like he's getting an advantage. So, like I said, it'll be fun if we see more clips of that.
Oh yeah, it's the clips. I think verse, with the skull clap and the thumb down, and like we see a lot of visual out of it. We don't see a lot of audio out of it. And
Mhm.
I think we're going to see more and more coming from verse this season. So I think he can take that mountain, that mountaintop of being trash talker for the Rams coming up this year.
Yeah. So do you think the thing with Whittington is like a lot of he's just progressing in his route running, progressing in his knowledge of the offense and being able to like I said this a lot, and I know sometimes you disagreed with me last year, but I said he was getting more open, in my personal opinion, than Cup was. And I thought it was a consistent when he was playing, he was a better player on the field at those points in time. And, ultimately, I think the OTAs, he's only going to get better. He's only going to know the playbook even more and being especially having Adams now also in that room, like he's had a lot of vets be able to pour in him.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think the problem that I see that's going to happen is again he's going to I feel like he's going to kind of be put to his side because again I think with having Puka, with having Adams, with having Higby and Tutu and stuff like that, I tend Sean McVay is going to stay with what is familiar and the fun toys that he has. And I don't
Yeah.
know if Jordan Whittington meets that. He's able to fill that if someone is down, but when we are fully healthy, it's one of those, is he going to be slide back? Unless they're trying to go with a heavier package. Because obviously,
He
Tutu
can
and
block.
Whittington are probably going to be switching out for each other. So when they're not going to go for that long and distance, Jordan Whittington's probably going to be that wide receiver 3 role.
Well, I think that's why they also let go Robinson was because they have confidence in him be that kind of like third, fourth wide receiver, switch
Yeah.
in and out with Tutu, hold his blocks, be able to get open. And I really think, Zach, there's a world where they don't need to draft another wide receiver for a year or two because they think Whittington is a good 2 to fill in after Adams retires or leaves the Rams. And that's a very realistic world. So, like I said, I think he's a great handcuff, especially if you have Puka with this OTA news. So, do you want to talk about Bennett next?
Sure. I don't really know what's going on with Bennett. You tell me what's going on with Bennett.
So, apparently, Bennett has impressed the offensive coaching staff this offseason with progressive growth. So, are you shocked, Zach? Are you thrilled? Are you excited to see another 3 games of Stetson Bennett in the preseason?
He's still QB3. I mean, there's no way he's taking over Garoppolo's gig at this point.
He doesn't need to.
And he doesn't. Correct. He doesn't need to. I mean, when you get down to QB3, am I supposed to be impressed that you're having growth? I mean, sure, but unless you're in line to become Matthew Stafford's successor, which I don't think Stetson Bennett is at this point.
Yeah. I'll just say with the QB class shaping up the way it is next year, not even if the Rams don't take a QB in the first 2 rounds, Bennett better grow or he's not going to be on this roster in a year. That's just right. Like that's just the reality. That QB class is so strong. I think the potential you can find a starter in the second if people slide and it doesn't kind of go like it did a year ago with like 5 QBs in the first 15 rounds. But that very well could happen next year. So, and the Rams could take with one of their picks a QB. I don't anticipate that, but we'll kind of see from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to come down to Stafford at this
Mhm.
point. If he's going to be around for 2 more years, then I think we could see another delay in that QB space. Also, it depends on what
Tackle
Garoppolo's
cornerback.
future is going to be as well.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that draft when it kind of comes up. Also, Brendan Fisk is back at OTAs after his, I think it was a knee surgery. I think we had this on our account too, Zach. We probably win that Eagles game if he doesn't go out because the amount of pressure he was able to apply. And I believe they had a drive right after he went out that led to a touchdown. And that was like the only air drive where they scored,
Yeah.
if I am remembering correctly. Every other time is a Saquon run.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Rams definitely have a way better shot at winning that. I think that their
Yeah,
percentage of
it's
winning would have increased significantly with
mhm.
that. So yeah, I think that that's a fair statement for sure. It's
Yeah.
great to see him back because really
Mhm.
having that core group being able to continue to sink and continue to get better is
Mhm.
just going to make this Rams defense super threatening going into the season.
Yeah, and I think that's also a reason why they drafted Stewart so high and they was like so high on him too, is to make sure like even if someone like Fisk goes down, like I felt like the defensive front still kept good pressure, but it wasn't like great 10 out of 10. Like when they're all on the same line and going, that's a top 3 defensive unit in the NFL, if not the best. And I feel like if you have other guy can step in and plug in and be able to keep that pressure from falling to like a 7 or a 6, keep it up to 8, 9, or 10, you're just going to win more and more football games that way.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree. Uh, Terrell Ferguson, let's talk about him a little bit. Tight end
Yeah.
seems to have really impressed Sean McVay and the coaching staff. I mean,
Yeah. So I'm interested to kind of get your take on this because Ferguson is like a very divisive candidate when he was coming out, and there are a lot of Oregon fans that talk about a hit he took mid-season, if not like early mid-season, is like to the head, and they kind of say like he slowed down his play a little bit after that happened, and it was very clear from behind the grind, Zach, that this Rams coaching staff loved him. What do you think about his play and his tape really appealed to the Rams coaching staff? And do you think they kind of assume like he fell partially because of the that hit and potentially that affecting some of his play down the stretch?
It definitely certainly could have. I mean, like you said, watching that behind the grind, like they desperately wanted him, and probably especially in light of the fact that they couldn't make that deal with Carolina in for the second pick.
Yeah, for Ted.
Um, yes,
We'll
or
talk about that next.
yeah, and so they really fell in love with this guy. I think it was on their wish list. They couldn't get this one; they were going to go after him, and McVay knows what he wants, and I think this was a good pick. And maybe there was some slowness to him. I didn't see that clip and watched him progress since then. But I said this, I think, the last time when we did draft him was like, this is going to be Higbee's replacement. Now, whether it's sooner
Mhm.
rather than later, that's still up to be decided, depending on how OTAs go in minicamp and throughout the summer training. But this is what he is going to be. I think he's the best candidate we've seen um, really since Higbee was drafted. I mean, I know that there's been others that we've tried to fill in gaps, but Higbee has always come out as number one because he's built bigger, he's
He's
tougher, he's able to push
dependable.
the ball, he's very dependable.
He's
Whether it was
Toyota.
through Jared
He's a
Goff or whether
Toyota.
it's Stafford, he's always
Yeah.
reliable. He pushes himself to get the extra couple yards. He plays the extra linemen when they need him to. His blocking is good. His receiving is good. He's just not as explosive as some of the other, top 5 tight ends in the league. So
He
I'm Go ahead.
he's definitely not like the sexiest. Like Higbee hasn't been the sexiest tight end. He's dependable. He's that Toyota. Doesn't go super fast. Doesn't get the best gas mileage, but good enough. Good enough. And I feel like with Ferguson, you could see such an explosive player. And we talked about this a lot in the last 2 years. Red zone has been probably single-handedly the biggest reason the Rams have lost games in the last 2 years. I would say up there and then secondary right below it. And I really think fantasy wise, if he can get going early, I think he could be a red zone monster. He's probably not going to get a lot of air yards because Stafford loves to target the wide receivers, especially over in middle of the field and on out routes and stuff. But if he can become a good red zone target, get some
And
easy touchdowns there, that could be a big help. And that could be the biggest difference between this Rams offense from the last 2 years.
I agree. And I think the problem that we had especially this past season, is the fact that we didn't have a red zone tight end. Whether you liked it or not, Higbee was actually pretty successful in the red zone. And I really think that if we would have had Higbee for the majority of the season, our red zone targets or our red zone completions would have been way
Wow.
higher
Yeah.
because he was so dependable. Cooper Cup wasn't open and Puka wasn't open. You could almost guarantee that Higbee would have been open.
And they're not going
So
to be able to do the same. Teams, defensive wise, aren't going to be able to double shade Puka. Because if you do that, you're going to leave Adams and Ferguson and potentially Higbee all on single coverage. And one of those guys are going to get open.
on top of, whether it's Tutu or Jordan Whittington, this is
Yeah.
going to become a crazy offense. If everything gets put together the way that I think Sean McVay sees it and the way that we are kind of also starting to realize the
Yeah.
potential, is that this is a very threatening offense. From the offensive line kind of being reshuffled around and whatever, to having Stafford as the QB, to the receiving weapons, to whatever we're looking at as far as the running back situation goes. This is a truly threatening team that I think teams really should not take for
Mhm.
granted.
Yeah, guys, if you're watching live, please comment and your questions and tell us where do you think this offense ends up at the end of next year? Do you think it's a top 5 offense, number 1 offense, 10 offense? What do you guys think? And I definitely think me and Zach are both. Normally, I'm the Debbie Downer, or as Zach likes to say, but I think we're both. I have them winning more games than you, so I'm super excited. I feel like health, of course, being a key factor there. If they stay healthy, I think it could all come together. They had a plan last year and it kind of fell apart very quickly. So things can definitely change. And hopefully our O line can gel. I think that's the biggest question mark is the O line going to gel, and will it be good enough to sustain a top 10 offense? And that remains to be seen. Like Avila kind of took a step back a little bit, not a huge one, but he didn't play as good as his rookie year. He had moments. Of course, we had Bo Limmer in for most of the year. That was kind of a mess.
It
And then
wasn't a
also
mess, but it
Havenstein
was.
struggling with
I
injuries.
Yeah, I think Limmer. I think he did an admirable job for what he was thrown in to
Not
do.
bad. Yeah.
And so I think, again, with what we're doing now, I think that we have a chance of getting the communication right from the jump. Having now a depth piece, whether, whatever we're looking at it, we have now the depth at that center spot, and we now have a voice who knows the system, who can teach Bo Lemmer, who can help um, keep things, more seamless. And then something does happen, then we were able to switch in that stuff. And that's why I said also just being able to bring back Andrew Whitworth back more, just kind of to talk with the offensive line. Sean McVay is so good about having his core team being able to come back and being coaches. He has all of these, quote unquote, free resources that he can use, from past players to past coaches, who will come in and help guide this team. And it just makes Coach McVay so special that he can bring all of these different groups of people together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Zach, what do you think about the new UDFA Willie Lampkin? Uh, are you intrigued by him? He's definitely a big boy. He's definitely a little bit more of that new mold like power, or what, gap scheme mold now instead of uh, zone scheme. He's more in that mold than what we were doing previously.
Yeah, again, I think this is it. It intrigues me because I think Sean McVay is trying to come up with the best for success.
Mm-hmm.
And whether this is I don't think it's an immediate input, but at least it gives some ways, especially right now where they have so many players that they can kind of formulate different schemes and see what works and what could be useful. I think that this is definitely one of those pieces. And again, as a if he does make the full roster, another depth piece is something that, again, we can't strive enough of how important it is to have the right depth pieces in place, just in case one of your starters falls. What about you?
Yeah, because I would say our depth has been good enough the last few years that we stayed afloat a little bit, at least enough to not complete. The wheels could have fully fallen off like last year. I think people got to count their lucky stars that we won that 49ers game the way we did. And
Sure.
then eventually struggled. We still struggled the 2 weeks after we started coming back with everyone also. So even then, I think the better depth, better situation. And, hey, I think the Rams are one of the few teams that if you are UDFA and you're out producing someone, even making a salary outside of like some top tier guys or like a first or second round pick, you will get the start over them. They are not afraid to bench people even if they are paying them. And that's what I like about this Rams team. They give everyone ample opportunity to earn snaps. And if you earn it, you're going to get it. And if you're not performing, you're going to lose snaps, right? That's just
Yeah,
reality.
and Yeah, exactly. And Sean McVay, he's still learning in this whole process. You look at him, and he came in as the youngest head coach, and made his way quickly, swiftly, to becoming the boy genius who could do no wrong. And but he's learning
Still
just like the
second
rest of
head
us.
youngest,
Still
second
second ahead,
youngest now.
the youngest head coach to win the Super Bowl. And he brings all this energy, but he's still
Yep.
trying to figure out how he can overcome things. And, you know, he's changing the slogans around the building. It was "We Not Me," which was super powerful to make it that Super Bowl, and to win it out. And now he's shifted from the "We Not Me" to "Win Then" or "We Then Me." Let's talk about us as a collective before we talk about us as a self. And I assume you read the Jordan Rodriguez interview of why that mentality has changed. Did you get to read
Uh,
that yet?
yeah, and I also saw a interview with her where on a podcast where she kind of talked about this, and we can segue into kind of like the Tet trade talks almost. But really, I thought again, guys, if you don't follow Jordan Rodriguez, dude, she's the best beat writer in the business. Fantastic for the Rams. But her explanation and kind of like talking about how McVay 22 was one of the hardest times after going over such a high. And I know in my life, I've been through similar circumstances where it when you ride so high and then you have such a low right after it, it can be very like disorienting and like your priorities. It's hard to kind of like, especially when you haven't gone through it yet, to realize out the other end what you could do to not only like potentially prevent that or at least shorten that time where you're in that valley. And it definitely makes sense. I've always loved the culture under Sean McVay. I feel like he's such a smart person when it comes to being a leader and setting up that culture. And as someone myself, I'm in military, I'm an NCO, and I definitely try to emulate some of those things when you talk about like setting an example and like pointing people in a certain direction when it comes to getting a job done and prioritizing the collective. But I also think we forget sometimes some people don't know how to measure that difference between the collective and themselves. And they kind of like go so hard at the collective that they can lose a part of themselves. And if you're not happy personally, that's going to come out on the end of like your work, your job, your family, and your relationships, and everything else starts to crumble. And it kind of doesn't matter because you will start impacting the rest
Yeah.
eventually if that happens. And McVay just had a very more elegant way of saying it like that.
Yeah, and he's teaching his players. We look at the collective, but you should also shouldn't forget about yourself. You need to be able to think inwardly, and it's not all about you, but you need to spend at least a little bit on yourself, and how you can make yourself better. So um, I love it. I love that we're just evolving. We not me to we then me. I think that's a good segue for the Rams, and to continue this, just continue with this high ride that
Yeah.
they're trying to get to the mountaintop again.
Well, he's not static, and I think that's something in this GM, and for Sneed's all his fault, and he's not a perfect GM. But when something's not working, they pivot, and I know we can get frustrated sometimes when it doesn't happen quick enough. But there are some teams that will sit with a guy who can barely catch that they drafted in the first round just because they drafted him and keep him on the roster for 2 years. And if that happens on the Rams, they will just admit they made a mistake. And that is something that so many fan bases wish they had was a GM and a head coach that like pivoted and actually tried to grow from their mistakes.
Yeah, and it's very rare that there's a lot of animosity towards that relationship. I mean, obviously, what happened with Jared Goff was unfortunate. Sean McVay has admitted that he wishes he would have done things way differently. There are things that happen, and you can't always do that. But for a lot of the instances where they have had to move on, there hasn't been as much animosity between the two
Yeah.
parties. And so I think that also, again, just another reason why the Sean McVay and the Sean McVay system that is put in place within the Rams is so successful. Um,
They're
but
not
but
perfect. Like, how many times, Zach, have we talked about, like, oh, they need to run in the red zone, especially last year in a certain point in time. They need to run in a red zone. Like, they lost this game because they didn't run in the red zone. And you know what McVay says in the presser? He says, I should have ran in the red zone, guys. I'll do that next week. And then in the first drive, they run it all the way to the red zone, and then they pass it
uh,
3 times and 3
yeah,
incompletes. And you're just like, but
yeah.
McVay, for all his, faults, is still one of the smartest head coaches and one of the best play designers. And I feel like,
Hey, and a lot of
you
times
know,
when you're the smartest man in the room, the only person that you have a difficult time with is yourself. And sometimes you
mhm,
get in your own way. And the analytics and the data says do it this way, but sometimes you just have to read the book again and be like, nah, I'm gonna pivot and we're gonna go this way. So
yeah,
that's one of the things. One of the things that we didn't talk about, that happened this week. We talked about Puka being gone last week for this family trip with his mom, but this week he
yep,
was back, and one of the things that I think is great for Puka is that he has Devonte Adams now. He's been able to learn for Cooper Cup for these last 2 seasons, and now he gets to learn from Devonte Adams in a different kind of situation. And so I think that is just another reason why Puka can be even more of a threat this year is because he's getting
mhm.
a new style of route running, a new style of how to play the game that I think that he could really adapt to. I think Puka is one of those characters who could be like Cooper Cup, but he could also be like a Devonte Adams. In their different styles.
So, like, I would feel like both are similar, kind of, in the sense where they were both like getting open by route running. But I
Hmm.
think the difference is Cup is a little bit more physical when it comes to at the stem of his route, where Devontae is far better at release. His release game is probably one of the best, if not like best in a decade. So the the question is, like, can Puka pick up the best parts of both of their games and be his own kind of wide receiver and figures out what works best for him? And how lucky do you have to be to play with probably two of the top wide receivers, at least in top 20 of the last decade,
Hmm.
right? Up there. And he got to play with both, and he can only get better from that. And I think, you know, very few players have ever caught as many miraculous catches as I've seen Puka catch. And I think the regular NFL fan base doesn't understand that yet because they only see it once or twice. We have seen one miracle catch probably once a game, if that.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely talking about at least once a month. One of those games, there's a miraculous catch. Whether it's bobbling on the helmet, whether it's the Super Cooper, whether or Super Puka. There's time after time where you can just think of his first TD catch. Not his first TD catch, but his one of the first catches in the Indianapolis Colts game that me and you attended, like where
Oh
he's just
yeah,
like
the
he
tip.
tips it the tip off
Yeah.
the fingers to catch the ball and still be able to take it
Yeah.
down the field. Like there's so many moments that we could describe where it's just amazing that he can even be able to do all those things within a game.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, you take it for granted because, like, Tyler Lockett, a really good wide receiver, we watched a lot of his games over the last, like, what, 8, 9 years. He only had one of those catches. He's a good wide receiver. At least against us, I know he had a few really good catches, but Puka, it's similar to Aaron Donald in the sense where, like, you don't realize in the moment how great, and I really think Puka could be the best wide receiver the Rams have had since Greatest Show on Turf. And
Yeah,
we'll see.
We'll definitely see. I mean, it's all going to happen on what happens this season. I mean, will Devontae
And
Adams
health.
take up? Yeah, health, but who's going to have the most reps? Who's going to get the
Yeah.
most looks from Matthew Stafford? Who's Matthew Stafford going to trust the most? Because it seems like, you know, whether you like it or not, Stafford does tend to cherry pick one player over another for a majority of the season. Once he starts to find rhythm with him, and once he finds success, he tends to stick with that person. Uh,
I don't necessarily think that's by Stafford's design. I think that's more like defenses like picking their poison and
but I mean,
them manipulating the defense
but
to break its own rules.
but you kind of have to look at that. That's just been. But if you also look at the tenured of when he was with the Lions too, he did seem to always trust in one player more than the rest. And again, not saying that he does it all the time, and not saying that he just finds a rhythm. And like he had the with Megatron, and then you go into the Rams, and he had such a composure with Cooper Kupp, and it was able to sync super well with him. And then Cooper Kupp went down, and then started finding success with Puka Nakua. I'm not saying that
So
it's a he takes 90% of the reps, but if he's taking 50% and everybody else is getting, or let's say 35%, and everybody else is taking 20%, that's still more reps that he's giving to one person than anybody else.
So, in defense to Stafford, how many teams did he fully have more than like one or two elite weapons? Let's like actually think about this. The only time I would say Stafford has had more than three elite weapons on the field at the same time was in 21 when we had OBJ and Cup. And
Well, that's
then
only two. He only had two weapons. I mean, you know,
Higby was, I believe,
I
still
guess you could
playing
count.
then too.
You could count Higby, but as far as like
Like
wide
good
receivers
weapon.
go,
It,
um,
But he was able to, and people don't remember this, Cup still kept up his trajectory, but OBJ was having good numbers too,
he
right?
was definitely. I
In
mean, man,
defense, like
you
we
talk
won the
about this,
playoff
and
games because of
how
him.
scary would it have been if we had Robert Woods, OBJ, and Cooper Kupp on the field, for that length? I don't think Cooper
Yeah.
Kupp might not have been triple crown, if that was the
No,
case.
OBJ was going to be triple crown that game because of how they were
No,
covering Cooper
I
Cup.
meant triple crown for the rest of the
Oh,
season. If
sorry. I thought you meant
yeah, not
MVP.
Super Bowl MVP, no triple crown. I think
Yeah.
if Robert Woods also would not have gone down, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
we may have he may not have had that
I don't
as
know, man.
successful of a year.
Skoranek, he was keeping up there with Robert Woods. So
Okay. Yep. All
cool.
right. Well, we're gonna move on from that one. Um, Yeah. Anything
Just
else
throw
you
that
wanna
out
you wanna
there.
chat about? I think we kind of nailed almost everything. We're still on Jalen Ramsey watch. It's June 1st, so
Yeah. I was
things will
wondering
get a
if you were
little
going to
bit.
bring that up.
I mean, things are going to get a little bit more heated here in the next, probably couple weeks to a month. We'll see what actually happens with that. There could be some trading going on around here. Obviously, the Rams don't want to take a big old, uh, you know, absorb the pay of Jalen Ramsey. But if there's a trade to be done in a modest, friendly deal, I could definitely see it happening.
Yeah, so what I'll say about this, because as you know, there was a lot of activity on X, Twitter, whatever it calls itself nowadays, because I basically said, I wouldn't mind Ramsey coming over. I would be happy. I feel like we definitely could need the help in the secondary, and we possibly do need the help. But I think I was more trying to point to like all these people saying like he will save our secondary and he's the future. I was more like saying, pump the brakes, guys. You guys need to relax. Uh, People very underrate how good Akello was. I'm not saying he was great, and I think people misunderstood. Basically, like I don't care if one is cornerback one, cornerback two. I don't think either is the future of the Rams, and I feel like both potentially could have big drop offs this year because of the age. And that is something people don't realize. We're not getting 2017, 2018 Ramsey. That's just not what we're getting. And, you look at their stats and they're somewhat similar outside of coverage grade. And a lot of factors can go into coverage grade. And that's what the fact Kello came in mid-season and he played snaps, high percentage snaps early without knowing the new playbook. And we did change our defensive playbook. So it's a lot closer than people want to give it credit for. And I think that was my biggest point. And of course, Twitter's not the best for nuanced discussions about DBs.
Sure.
And, people can say, I don't know ball all they want, but all I'll say is I said Brock Bowers would be generational. I think that's proven out to be a pretty good take on Brock Bowers.
Sure.
I said that Chase Brown, he was going to be a top running back in the NFL. That looks pretty good, and he was a 4th or 5th round pick. Like, guys, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I have bad takes. I will sit there and say it, but people trying to tell me Jalen Ramsey is going to just fix the secondary at 30 years old, he could fall off very quick.
He could, and I wouldn't say that he would fix it, but having him as a rotational piece, I think would.
I don't disagree with that.
This team is trying to win a Super Bowl. You don't need someone on your team, and we've seen this before. You don't need someone with a long-term contract to win a Super Bowl. You need someone who can get in, get the job done, and then maybe even leave. I mean, you look at the Von Miller, you look at the OBJ, you look at a lot of the success that we've had over the years. We bring in one player, and they may succeed or they may fail, but it's a piece that can try to help us get us over the hump one more time. Obviously, you're going to need the Matthew Staffords, who's going to be there for a longer term deal. You're going to need someone like maybe a Puka Nacua to extend that life of the journey. But you're going to need pieces that you could bring in on a short term, team friendly deal. Yeah. And if you could do it with someone you have chemistry with, like a Jalen Ramsey, and who's still, is he what he was? No, but he is still a dang good cornerback, defensive back, and I think that it's something that you should really consider. Someone who's familiar with the defense, who can gel with your team. You know who he is inside and out. You know what his skill level is. So I think it's a worthy conversation as long as it is team friendly deal. I don't want us to blow it out of the water just because his name is Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, and also, let's not mention Manuel Forbes. Apparently, he's bulked up and he's been playing really good in OTAs. So, there's a potential we could get a first, second round level talent that's very young and youthful that really just needs more opportunity and snaps to grow. And maybe he fits better in our system than he did in Washington. And we'll kind of see, right? But, people thought it was going to be a slam dunk to bring in, and you like the idea of bringing in you will get Ramsey and you will like it. Yeah, I mean, again, I won't be upset as long as we don't pay him $20 million. I don't think Jalen Ramsey at 30 years old is necessarily worth 20 mil. I would move him to safety. Also, I do love your content and your videos. Your weekly sports balls tree, fantastic. I'll just say that's the most hilarious content you guys could watch. So if you guys ever want to watch some funny weekly NFL YouTube content, Urinating Tree, I love his stuff. So he's kind of crazy. He's watching our video right now.
Yeah, and then the other thing I think that's left is we're still on Kylen Williams' watch as far as will he get a deal, will he not get a deal. Seems like conversations are moving. Healthy is the word that keeps happening, but he showed up to OTAs. Doesn't seem like he's really, do you want
to know how they described Todd Gurley's knee in 2019?
As what?
Do you want to guess the word?
What's
Healthy.
the word? Well, they weren't
Healthy.
saying he was healthy. They were saying they were having healthy
Yeah,
conversations.
they said his knee was healthy. It was progressing and it was going good. I'm just pointing that out there.
Okay. And they still signed him, and they did.
No, they signed him the year before.
Well, sure, but
Yeah.
they could still sign him. They could still get rid of him, but they could still sign him. Anyways,
I think Kyron's on our team for a year. I don't think he would hold out because it's not exactly like people are banging down the doors for a new running back.
sure. I don't think so either. But again, it's one of those things where, again, if they could find a middle ground, I think they would extend them if they could. If there
Yeah,
was if there was a common middle ground.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna find a middle ground. I think he wants 13 to 14 mil, and I think the Rams are trying to stick below double digits. To be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I would more foresee something in the 9 at most. So
I would be fine with 9. I would prefer 8, but it's only $1 million, Zach. Only $1
yeah,
million.
only $1 million.
Yeah.
Don't you have that in your back pocket? You could just.
I don't have $1 million in back pocket, but Kyron's earned the bag, so I won't be upset if he goes
Yeah,
somewhere
I mean
else.
that's the thing is I think this is where me and you both disagree. You disagree with me on this, but he was the reason why we were successful in the first half of the season. You cannot put it on anybody else but him. He was the TD magnet, pulling every inch. I don't. You can't disagree with that. That is who he was. He was one of the top 5 running backs of the league this past year. And whether it's because, and I get he's not explosive. I get it. I completely understand that. But he put in the work. He held that team together, winning in the first half of the season because of who he is. I don't think Blake Corum would have been that person because of being a rookie.
I do disagree with that. I
don't care.
I'm probably the president and only last remaining member of Blake Corum's fan base for now. But I think he's a dog, and I think Hunter is going to be a really good addition. At least as a
don't
third
disagree that he's not good. My point is that I don't think he could have taken Kyron's place of the workload that he did.
Yeah, I mean, early our offensive playbook is one of the top playbook or hardest playbooks to learn. So especially with all the motions and fake movements and stuff like that, and with play calls that are 20 words long, it is just as a side note hilarious when you watch clips of Stafford telling McVay okay, I got it, you can stop calling in the play, and McVay has 6 more words to say because he wants to be as detailed as possible. And it ends up just being a batted down ball or something stupid.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So that kind of wraps up our episode of OTAs minicamp. We will come back here in a week or two when we get some more information. Never know. We might do an emergency episode if the Rams come back out with some ridiculous trade things that happen. So anything else you want to mention before we wrap this thing up?
Nope. Like I said, guys, pick up Whittington on fantasy if you need a handcuff for Puka. What other fantasy stuff for the Rams do I want to talk about? Corum and Hunter. I would personally pick Corum, but there are a lot of people who think Hunter could kind of win out. Depends how deep your benches are. If you have a really long bench, pick up both if you can. Hunter's going pretty early, I think, if I checked round-wise for longer format drafts. So that's good. And then Devontae is a good quality pickup in the 3rd, 14th round. So there's a little fantasy advice for anyone listening.
Yeah, sounds great. And then check out Ashton's Fantasy Podcast, also on the ECR podcast for anybody who would like to check that out as well. How many episodes have you put out so far?
Right now, just 2, and we will be doing the third one in next week or two, or a few weeks.
Perfect.
Fantasy content's going to be a little bit slower until the season.
No worries. But yeah, so everyone, thank you again for watching the East Coast Rams podcast. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us youtube.com/East Coast Rams. Congrats to Trevor, who got to win our jersey giveaway last week, our Kevin Dotson jersey from Honolulu. So it's really great that we gave away that jersey. So keep up with us for any of our next giveaways that we will have. So yeah, youtube.com/East Coast Rams. Please make sure you subscribe. You can find us at East Coast Rams on X. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads at East Coast Rams Pod, and we're also on Blue Sky. Just search for at East Coast Rams. I am Zach Mayer. You can find me at Zach Mayer on X, and you can find Ashton at RamFan Ashton 1 on X as well. Thank you guys for checking this video out. We appreciate everyone who interacted with us, whether that was through the chat or just by watching the video. And we will see you guys next time. Whose house? Rams house.